All right, let's talk about one of the most confusing parts of a surrogacy journey, the pregnancy timeline, especially when you're doing a 5-day embryo transfer. You hear the numbers and it just makes you scratch your head, right? How can you be almost 3 weeks pregnant when the embryo itself is only 5 days old? Well, today we are going to break that all down and make it make sense. This is the big one, isn't it? It just sounds mathematically impossible. The tiny little embryo is only 5 days old. So how in the world are you already 2 weeks and 5 days pregnant? It's probably the most common question we see, but I promise you there's a totally logical reason behind it all. So to figure out this little paradox, we first have to get into how doctors and medical teams date a pregnancy. And when it comes to IVF and surrogacy, well, they had to create a whole different rule book. It's all about making sure every pregnancy is measured the exact same way. Okay, so here's the main difference. You know how in a traditional pregnancy, everything is counted from the first day of the last menstrual period, the LMP? Well, with IVF, there isn't really a last menstrual period to count from. So to keep everything consistent and make sure all the medical milestones line up, they created a standard. And the key to that standard is the day of the egg retrieval. So here's how the math actually works. To make it match a natural cycle, the day of the egg retrieval is automatically considered 2 weeks pregnant. It's like a medical starting point. Then that little embryo grows in the lab for 5 days. So on transfer day, you just add those 5 days on top of the 2 weeks, and boom, you are officially 2 weeks and 5 days pregnant. The big takeaway here is that it's not really about the embryo's literal age. It's all about having one single, consistent timeline for everyone. This makes sure that whether a baby is conceived naturally or through IVF, the due dates, the ultrasounds, all those important milestones, they're all measured from the same universal starting line. Okay, so we've cracked the code on the timeline. Now let's zoom right in on transfer day itself. What is actually going on inside your body at that moment? So the embryo that's transferred on day 5 has a special name. It's called a blastocyst. Think of it as a more developed, more advanced embryo. And that's really important because by this 5-day mark, the strongest, most viable embryos have proven they can keep growing, which usually means they have a much better shot at implanting successfully. The whole process is like a beautifully choreographed dance. First, your body is prepared with hormones to make sure the uterine lining is perfectly thick and welcoming. Then comes the transfer itself. But here's the part a lot of people don't realize. Implantation is not instant. That little blastocyst still needs to float around for about 1 to 3 days after the transfer, before it snuggles in and attaches to the uterine wall. And that, of course, brings us to what is, let's be honest, the hardest part of this whole journey for pretty much everyone, the infamous 2-week wait. That time between the transfer and the official test, it can feel like an eternity, and it takes a ton of patience. Now, during this wait, you might start to feel things, a little bit of cramping, maybe some light spotting, your breasts might feel tender, or you might just feel bloated and exhausted. These are all super common. And this is a big but, a lot of these are also side effects of the progesterone medication you're taking. And this is so, so important to remember. You could have every single symptom on that list, or you could feel absolutely nothing at all. And either way, you could have a successful pregnancy. The presence or absence of symptoms is just not a reliable sign. So please, try your best not to overanalyze every little twinge. This is really the time to lean on your people. Rally your support system. Keep talking with your intended parents. That open communication is everything. Trust your medical team. They're your guides. And if you can, connect with other surrogates. No one gets it like someone who has been in your exact shoes. All right, after what feels like the longest 2 weeks of your life, it's finally time for the moment of truth. Time to get the real answer. But it's not just when you test, it's how you test that really matters. So you might be wondering, why does the clinic make such a big deal about a blood test? Why can't I just use a home pregnancy test? Well, it all comes down to accuracy. A home test can be really misleading. It can give you a false negative if it's too early, or even a false positive from leftover hormones from your trigger shot. The blood test, though, is the gold standard. It's incredibly accurate because it doesn't just tell you if the pregnancy hormone is there, it tells you the exact level, which gives your doctors so much crucial information. So what's the magic number? Day 9. For a 5-day transfer, the absolute earliest you can get a reliable blood test result is 9 days after your transfer. Any earlier, and you're just running a really high risk of getting an inaccurate result. Patience is key here. And getting that first positive test is amazing, but it's just the first step. Your clinic will almost always have you come back for a second blood test, usually about 48 hours later. What they're looking for is to see if your HCG levels are doubling. That doubling is a fantastic early sign that the pregnancy is progressing in a healthy, strong way. Okay, so let's just do a super quick recap of the most important things to remember. First, on transfer day, you are already 2 weeks and 5 days pregnant, medically speaking. Second, implantation happens a few days after that transfer. Third, the blood test is the only way to know for sure. And finally, early symptoms mean, well, they don't mean much of anything, so try not to stress about them. Just understanding the why behind this confusing timeline can actually take a lot of the stress out of the process. It's empowering. So the last question isn't about science, it's about you. Knowing all of this now, what can you do to prepare yourself emotionally and take care of yourself on this incredible journey that's ahead?